Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to Ed Up on the Ed Up Experience podcast, where we make education your business. I have said that probably over 1,000 times, and I'm wondering how I could have all these sound effects and never have recorded myself saying that intro so that I don't have to keep saying it. And I could have done that before. I don't know why. Maybe because I like to. Anyway, everybody can get out of my head now. This is Joe Salustio back with you on another episode of the Ed Up Experience podcast. I've got a great guest who I was super excited to talk to. And now she's here, so that is fantastic. I thought she might no-show me, but she showed up right on time, which is fantastic. I want to remind our audience of a couple things as we move forward. These are really important to, hopefully to you, the higher ed audience, and I've brought it up on several podcast episodes. I want to say it again, and that is that we, Elvin and I, the Ed Up Experience founders, are using a part of our website to create a new way for people across higher education to get their written work published and promoted out to audiences across the space. We know there's trade publications. Those trade publications sometimes are looking for the stories, the journalistic bend to things. And if you've got something that you want to just highlight, sometimes it doesn't make it into those trade pubs. I want to know what that is, and so does Elvin. And so we have, up to this point, I don't know how many articles. We probably put 20, 25 articles up there. People write about what they care about. We publish it. We promote it to our worldwide audience, give you a link so you can push it on LinkedIn to your own audiences. And that way we all win telling the great stories that we'd like to tell. That's Ed Up Editorials. You send me what you want to write about. I don't care about these journalistic, what are the writing requirements? I don't know. What do you want your writing requirements to be? What story do you want to tell? That's the story we need to hear. If you write 40,000 words, I don't think anybody's going to read it. So use your best judgment. Maybe 800 words, 1,000 words. Some pictures obviously help, but you write the article that you want. And we're looking for regular writers too. If you want to write something once a month, we'll put you on a schedule and we'll get your writing out there. So for anybody that wants to dust off that pen, dust off that piece of paper, or maybe use your computer, that's up to you. Ed Up Editorials, and you can submit your articles to edup@edupeditorials.com. Okay. None of this is written down, by the way. I make this up as I move along. But somebody that's not going to make anything up today is my guest. And I'm going to bring her in right now because she's been waiting patiently. Here she is, ladies and gentlemen. She's Dr. Ann Clancy. She's head of higher education strategy, and she's a higher education advisor at T-Mobile. Ann, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Joe?
Good. Did I get your intro right? Because I've been sweating the whole time.
You did.
That's a lot of responsibility. T-Mobile is like this humongous, massive company. By the way, we're coming off, my co-founder says I can't put a timestamp on these episodes. Elvin, he yells at me when I do. But we've come off and watched the Super Bowl recently, and I believe there's like a massive T-Mobile advertisement, which was super cool because it was, we invite our competitors to come and try out our stuff. So tell us about T-Mobile, the company, and then what's your role in higher education and what higher education role T-Mobile plays?
We're excited to announce the first of its kind higher education podcast conference, brought to you by Edu Alliance, the Ed Up Experience, and Podium. This is happening Saturday, July 12th at the University of Illinois Chicago campus. This is an in-person event, one day only, the first of its kind. This is for people working in and around higher education who are interested in starting a podcast, who may have a podcast, want to learn more about podcasting. So if you want to be there, please go to higheredpodcon.com. That's higheredpodcon.com to learn how you can get your early bird registration, see who the keynote will be, and how you can submit proposals to be a part of this amazing inaugural conference. So that, again, go to higheredpodcon.com to learn more.
Do you want to get invites to special events? Do you want to get exclusive early access to ad-free episodes, extended episodes, bonus episodes, behind-the-scenes episodes, and original content? Do you want to accelerate your professional development? Well, you can go to edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com and become a subscriber today.
Absolutely. So first of all, Joe, I would never no-show. I've always said this to my former students and to my kids and to my colleagues, is showing up is 90% of the battle, right?
I love it.
So if it's on the calendar, unless there's some major emergency, you just got to show up. You never know what's going to happen.
That's right.
So T-Mobile in higher education. I had the same question 4 years ago when they contacted me. And I'll give you a little bit about that background if you want. So I come from higher education. I started as adjunct faculty serving at a college and teaching dental public health. And then I moved to the community college system and I served as tenured faculty, program director, department chair. And then most recently, I served as vice president of academic and student affairs, serving as the provost at one of the city colleges of Chicago. So I come from higher education, and
that's higher ed cred.
I kind of did it all in that space, right?
Nailed it.
And I loved my job and I loved working with the students. And I still, when I have the opportunity, I adjunct. I love to be in the classroom and quite honestly, it's a big part of, I learn as much from the students as they do from me, maybe sometimes more. And it's something that I think I always want to do. But 4 years ago, T-Mobile contacted me because they were looking for somebody to help them within the higher education space. And it took me a long time to understand why my cell phone company wanted me to help work for them. And so I'll give you a little bit of background about why.
Yes.
So in 2019, 2000, T-Mobile merged with Sprint. So this was big in the telecommunication world. And this is all stuff I've learned over the last 3.5 years, by the way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I am very new to this space, but Sprint had a philanthropic project called Project 1 Million. And one of the factors of T-Mobile purchasing Sprint was that they wanted to expand that philanthropic arm. So T-Mobile created Project 10 Million, which was to help close the digital divide in the K through 12 space. Because if we know about the homework gap or digital divide, we know that students who are under-resourced or particularly are qualifying for the free and reduced lunch program are much more likely to not have access to the internet or reliable internet at home.
Yikes!
And so T-Mobile provides, still to this day, provides 4 years of a free hotspot to those children and their families so
That's
that
amazing.
Students can do their homework at home to help close that homework gap to help close that digital divide.
Epic.
And so because of that work that T-Mobile was doing in the K through 12 space, they wanted to start to look at higher education and what kind of impact and what kind of work we could do with institutions of higher education to help with different areas. And I can get into that down the road. And so, yeah, it took me a little while for me to understand what my role would be and why my cell phone company wanted somebody like me to work for them. But once I understood sort of this larger picture, I was really excited about the opportunity to, one, kind of expand my toolbox, but also use some of those, dust off some of those business school tools I had, but also to do some impact at scale with colleges and universities across the country to help improve student success, access and equity in education. And I will never stop saying access and equity these days in making sure that, thinking about technology as a resource is something that we will always continue to do. So that's sort of the high level overview.
Was the initiative for T-Mobile to serve higher ed a COVID consequence? Like, did COVID sort of pull back the blanket and go, oh, wait a minute, we got a lot of people across higher ed. Yeah, K-12, we get it, kids, families. But all of a sudden, we've got adults, young adults, all over the place trying to access their network from home. But wait a minute, they don't have Wi-Fi. They use their community college as their place of Wi-Fi. So now they got to go home and do work, and they can't go anywhere and they can't do anything. Was that the exposure?
Absolutely. It did. It was all timing, and it was really good timing from a business perspective when you think about the merger closed in April of 2020.
It's crazy.
So it expanded the resources and the ability of the business to business sort of sectors within T-Mobile. So that along with COVID was a huge sweet spot, right? But the desire to increase, what we call in our sector, the higher education vertical, right, was because of the increasing data that was coming out about the need Previous to 2020, and I did this work back when I was at city colleges, is we made equity plans, right?
Yeah.
We created equity plans to close equity gaps in achievement. And we looked at all kinds of high impact practices, from, advising to remedial classes to, resources, but we did not look at technology. We did not look at access technology. We did not look at the digital divide data. And so that wasn't a part of that equity plan. And COVID really opened up our eyes and gave us some data on how big that equity gap really is in terms of access to technology as a resource, access to internet, access to computers and devices. And so certainly there's an opportunity there that T-Mobile saw to be able to impact higher education. But beyond just that piece was sort of this larger business opportunity to expand the spectrum, which is 5G. Everybody hears about 5G, to expand that spectrum, which is super influential in the ability to bring last mile connectivity to areas where there isn't internet. If we think about really rural areas where there's not cables and pieces like that, the spectrum from T-Mobile can actually make it to those places, and we could bring that signal and provide broadband. Right. So there's a lot of pieces here, and I'm kind of jumping. So I'll let you ask questions to help clarify if I'm not.
No, that's good. In fact, my memory is like, I'm going through my 1,000 episodes right now in my memory. And one of my friends in higher education is the president of Motlow State Community College. His name is Dr. Michael Torrance.
I love Dr.
Him on text right now, actually. I was texting him this morning. And MT, as I like to refer to him, he's my boy. We talk about.
He is the coolest guy ever.
But you haven't spent a lot of time with me. I would say he's probably the second coolest guy ever. But he is pretty cool. Let's just say that. So I had MT on. I had Dr. Michael Torrance on, and we had a whole episode devoted. I can't remember the number. It was around 500, 400. To him partnering with T-Mobile to offer all of his students cell phone with hotspot access during the pandemic. That was like a huge thing for him to keep his students engaged and involved. So I'm wondering, I saw your face light up, so I'm guessing that this is a thing, right?
I wish I could flash the picture of me and MT together with our masks on, passing out those cell phones to his students.
You were there in person. Very nice. See how this podcast always, it's funny how EdUp just sort of, Elvin and I talk about this, like it just always kind of comes back around to things that we talk about and these connections that we have. But that was really groundbreaking to see during COVID, to see T-Mobile come in and say, we're going to work with this community college. We're going to do it through partnerships and enable these students to not lose connection, because they are in a more rural area, because they need it. And, there are mental health stories out the wazoo about people who are using community college or their institution to escape their home life. And now COVID sent them back into this bad home life. And I mean, you just go, man, a company, technology helps keep us free in these tough environments. So maybe talk about that relationship a little bit, because I think that relationships are what we do in higher ed, and how that evolved, and maybe what the result was.
Yeah. So, Motlow State Community College, again, sort of brainstorming with Dr. Torrance on how to help meet the needs of his students, how to ensure that his students had the resources to be successful, to have that ubiquitous connectivity.
That's right.
Right. The other thing that we learned, and that changed us in higher education, is that students learned, and they realized that they like to learn from anywhere. Learning doesn't just happen in the classroom. It happens in the interactions with your peers. It happens while you're at work. It happens in all of those in-between times. And to be able to translate the way that we're connecting with our campus while we're doing these learnings from anywhere is really important. And so that was another piece of sort of this vision that Dr. Torrance had, that we were able to bring to life. Now, the reason why we provided phones that had 5G connectivity so that it could be a hotspot or a resource, right? Because one, there are surprisingly number of students who might have a phone, but it might not have any data or connectivity. So they use that phone just for the Wi-Fi when they have it. And so that kind of takes away that ability to learn from anywhere or to connect or have that ubiquitous connectivity. But to be able to toggle that phone as a hotspot, to be able to work on a computer or a tablet, is also a really big deal, because I can tell you the number of faculty members, me included, that have seen students try to submit their work, business plans, essays that they've written on their cell phone.
Surprise!
So being able to use a computer that has internet capability wherever they are, that hotspot's a big deal, right? So these are all the reasons why Dr. Torrance chose that 5G hotspot phone, right?
And this would have been like when you were first starting, right?
This was in 2021.
Yeah,
Yes,
so you'd been there a year?
I started in May of 2021. We launched that program that fall. So that was August of 2021.
I mean, what a thing to be involved in your first, as you go through the transition of like, why does my carrier want me to work for them? And then seeing it manifest itself in such a big way must have been like, oh, wow,
Yeah. Honestly, before I even accepted the job, I had 8 conversations with the leadership, because I needed to be able to make sure that our visions were aligned, because it was a huge leap of faith, right? And it wasn't always an easy transition. I've had a lot of leaders ask me that when I go to meetings and such, is like, how did you make that transition? Why did you make it? And now I get to have these conversations with college presidents, with tech leaders, with faculty all over the country, thinking about how technology really does impact learning and teaching and learning, the student experience, student success. And we can go into all of those things, and how infrastructure is changing on campuses, right?
Yeah.
How Wi-Fi isn't necessarily the end all and be all anymore. How it needs to be augmented with this ubiquitous connectivity that we come in and think through with the college and universities. But just to finish up with Motlow State, one of the most exciting pieces that I really love, besides working with a visionary like Dr. Torrance, because he is just a really cool guy, was that, one, he was able to get his whole staff bought in, and the internal stakeholder buy-in was awesome. And then the data they collected, both qualitative and quantitative data from the students as they implemented this 5G, program, and to have a 5% increase from fall to spring retention.
Yeah.
I literally, when he was going over the data with me, I started crying, because back in my days at the community college, if we were able to impact a 0.5% increase, a 0.5 to a 1% increase in fall to spring retention, we would have a party, a literal party. To have a 5% increase is huge.
This is about saving the future of humanity.
So it was just super great and super validating that this was the right thing to do, and to continue on this path, to try to think about how can we think about student success in different ways, where we're thinking about technology as a resource, digital equity, ensuring that we continue down this road, and working with T-Mobile to make sure that it's mutually beneficial. So of course there's business development. T-Mobile's a for-profit company, but what can we do to give back to the universities? How can we make this easier for them to provide resources to students, in a way that students wouldn't be able to do on their own?
So take us through from A to B. So now on the 5G network, Motlow State, we're now forward, three and a half years, 2021, well, that's 4 years, 2025. You've cemented your position. You've been there for multiple years. How has this job progressed from then to now? What are some of those big highlight points that you would highlight, for lack of a better way to say it?
Yeah. So we started off with primarily working on digital equity, student devices, student success, right? Mm-hmm. So it was really about sort of that student piece, because the further we get away from COVID, the less universities and colleges are focused on the very individual technology as a resource piece.
We've gone back into what was, right? We've kind of cemented back in the way we were doing it before.
Ish, because that is still a conversation. That is still a conversation. We still have more and more, increasingly, even large state land grant institutions who are very interested in providing devices, meaning tablets, laptops,
right,
for their students to help create some kind of, baseline. Everybody at least has the basics, what they need to be successful.
Right.
But where we've evolved is into more of the campus environment, the overall connectivity experience, and gone from student success conversations to academics and research. What kind of technology and connectivity is needed for academics and research? Campus safety. The number 2 concern of parents, right, are their students safe on campus?
Right.
And so using technology and connectivity to ensure that campus safety is really up to speed. That's cameras and really, not just the old blue lights we used to see, but blue lights that actually have AI cameras, as well as even drone deployment in the case of, needing lighting and cameras in different places, to innovation, right? So thinking about, there's a lot of maker spaces,
right,
entrepreneurship labs where, the connectivity and the technology that we can bring to those spaces is really, really important to some of those conversations. The biggest one really is infrastructure. So I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier in this conversation that campus Wi-Fi is awesome and it's probably never going to go away, but it's not ubiquitous. So students these days want to be able to go out in the quad and study and maybe start their exam in the library and then move to their dorm and then go to the quad. And what we're able to do on campuses with this network we can build is really build that ubiquitous connectivity to make it seamless. We're in a mobile first world, right? And Wi-Fi is not meant for mobility. And so what we're doing is we're bringing our 5G network in a hybrid or a private fashion to be able to augment the current Wi-Fi infrastructure to make it ubiquitous. And
now
then
listen up.
If you think about
I want to interrupt you just for a minute because what you said is so right. Wi-Fi was not meant to be, what did you say? Wi-Fi wasn't meant to be mobile, right? Because it is place-based or at least area-based, geography-based. So when you move away from it, you lose the connection. And I guess I've thought, I don't know if I've ever thought about it so like directly like that, because I go into a place and it's like, I got to get on Wi-Fi. And when I can't access it, it is a mess. I was in Mexico not too long ago and my phone wasn't set up. And so I go outside to get an Uber and it just stopped. It's like connecting to your ride, stopped. And I was like, uh-oh, I got to turn my cell on, but then I'm going to get charged like $40 million for roaming charges. I had to go back into the airport, connect to the Wi-Fi, get my ride, run out. So you're right. It does hold you hostage in a way. So how do you create that ubiquitous campus experience to where, and you're so right, where I could be sitting on the grassy knoll in the springtime taking my course, and maybe I don't have to go sit in class, but I do want to go to the meal hall with my friends. Right. I may not want to go sit in. So, it's just like mind blowing when you think of it that way.
Yeah. So those are the big conversations we're having now. So we've really evolved in the last 4 years. And like I said, it's kind of, I think about sort of one of those Venn diagrams where it started out as, the center of the circle, which is, student connectivity. And then each one of these different areas kind of built around it, and infrastructure is the big one now. And the really cool thing is that when we're building partnerships with colleges and universities, we really think about how we can work and be nimble with what works for the institution. So if they have CapEx to spend, we can develop a program for them that's based on their capital expenditure model. If they only have OpEx, we can do that too. And then we can provide in-kind contributions in terms of network build out or device subsidies, right? To help with the bottom line and to make the budget a lot more palatable, especially in a day and age when we're looking at risk adverse budgeting
Yes.
because of unknowns, right? So, that's where I come to the table with T-Mobile, is also trying to give some hard give backs. Like, we're working with a university right now, and it's a multi-year, it's a 12-year contract. And we're going to provide scholarships, and we're going to provide some marketing dollars for them, because what was important for the university. It's also a really good story to tell. T-Mobile and this university are partnering to expand connectivity on campus, to bring, enhance the student experience. Those are really good messages and things that are really at the core of our mission, as being the best in the world at connecting people to their world.
As I think about it now, I mean, a company like T-Mobile is really essential to close the digital divide. Because you look at artificial intelligence and the way it's expanding, it creates the have and the have-nots, and it creates a bigger gap, because the front end, those that have the resources, have the people, maybe they're in a, I don't know, they have the resources is really the key word. And people are accessing AI, they're using AI, they're building out infrastructure because they are expanding this technology. And the lower end of those who can't access, who don't even have broadband access, never was fixed all the way. So you just create this stretch that's, the chasm that's really hard to close. And you think about T-Mobile being a real solution in that. We have to bring up, rising, what is it? The rising water lifts all ships. What's that saying? You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Rising water. Anyway, if you're out there listening, you probably are correcting me right now. But the idea that we have to bring everybody along, or else that divide isn't good for the economy. It's not good for business. It's not good for workforce. It's not good for any of those things. Are those ongoing conversations, like you feel this responsibility? We have to pull those people along who don't have access.
Higher Ed PodCon is coming. Go to higheredpodcon.com. That's higheredpodcon.com to learn more.
Do you want to get exclusive early access to ad-free episodes, extended episodes, bonus episodes, original content, invites to special events, and more? Do you want to accelerate your professional development? Do you want to get all this while helping to sustain EdUp? Then go to edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com and become a subscriber today.
100%. I mean, that's I think at the heart of soul of what we're really trying to accomplish. I mean, we're really engaged with, even federal agency initiatives that are looking to close the digital divide, because, like you said, it's not just about having access to telecommunications. It's having access to healthcare and banking and the economy. Telehealth is so important, particularly in rural areas where the largest digital divide occurs. Right. And so that is why the work that T-Mobile does, not just in the higher education space, but in the local and state and K through 12 space, is really important, because of the affordability of what we're able to do. Not even to mention the free piece that we do in the Project 10 Million is really about, not just, like I said, it's not just about providing internet, mobile internet, broadband. It's about providing access to all of these pieces that are access to our world.
Tell them like it is.
I used to be in healthcare, right? And I used to work in public health, and we would talk about social determinants of health and the pieces of a person's world that determines whether or not they're going to be, healthy. Access to food, access to education, right? Income. Now having access to the internet and technology as a resource is really a big part of that, because of how we need the internet and technology to access healthcare, to access banking, to access education, to increase economy, workforce, health. So it's really a big important piece of this. And this is something that we talk about a lot at T-Mobile. And it's something that we do as T-Mobile's higher education team, which I'm on, is part of this larger education team, which is part of this larger government team. which is part of larger this, external relations team, which is all really focused on ensuring that there is no dead spots in terms of access. And that's one of the things T-Mobile's doing. By the end of 2025, we're to cover 99% of the US with our 5G.
Are you kidding me?
So,
That's awesome.
These are the things that are really exciting when you think about the change of going from, working in higher education, which is really impacting lives, to being able to really impact lives at this scale that it does impact education, but it's much bigger than that.
You kind of talked about the retention piece a little bit. I want to come around to that tactical piece because I think that's important to talk about. As an industry, and as well as I do, budget constraints are real right now. We see these headwinds and we talk about them. We kind of talk about them now like they're, demographic shifts or enrollment cliff, and we just kind of throw these terms around. But the bottom line is that schools, many are try to figure things out. The FAFSA it's still creating its impact, a year later. Administration changes. We see, all of these things, and not like anything we haven't seen before, but it's kind of continuing on. And schools that were okay 3 years ago are not okay now, and they're trying to come out of it. And the thing about technology is it's like cart before horse or horse before cart. It's hard to figure out, how do I come back from this enrollment decline if I don't have the infrastructure to serve the student who is expecting to have this infrastructure component? So do I wait and not stretch myself and hope that I come out of it not having what the student wants, hoping that they still choose my school, or do I invest in this infrastructure knowing that students want technology, right? I've said on this podcast a million times, Anna, and I know it's you too. I skip the intro on Netflix. I skip it. I hit that button because it's there and because I don't want to wait a minute for the introduction. And that's what I do in my personal life. And then somehow in higher ed, we can't have that same level of experience at many institutions because that infrastructure isn't there, and it needs to be in this world, doesn't it?
Right. Oh, so 68% of college students say technologies and or infrastructure are a factor in their college choice.
Wow.
Okay, I'm trying to find where that data is from, and I want to say it's from the Pew Institute, but maybe I'll just send you a message later. Because I always like to source it.
I'm not into validating stats, but I could. I was thinking it'd be even higher than that. I mean, if you think it is everything to students now, especially your Gen Zs and what comes after them, Gen Y and the alphas. It's everything.
So if we think about that, and if we think about if we have a institution that is aging technology infrastructure and isn't able to connect the devices that I bring onto campus, that's going to be an issue. And the other piece is assumptions that we make. Our students come to campus with the resources, or we tell them what they need, and so it's a prerequisite. Those are assumptions, and a lot of times I'll work with technology departments, or sometimes even like the IT libraries, the folks that are in the technology piece of the resource centers, and I say, have you polled your students? Have you looked at data? Or are you just making assumptions? And oftentimes they're like, well, we can do a survey. I'm like, how are you going to do the survey? Well, we'll send an email out. Oh, is that data skewed? Because you're assuming that these students all have access to, or they're checking their emails and they're going to answer. And so, or you're only going to get answers from the students that
email, by the way. Students don't check their university emails. That's a big deal.
Right. So there's a lot of pieces we have to solve for when we think about that larger question of, how do we impact retention from a technology standpoint if we don't really have all the data? And it's hard to get it. But what we can tell you is that we have data from institutions who are providing technology.
There you go.
And their numbers are increasing. And they're going to continue to come out. So I'm working with universities right now that have recently impacted implemented a one-to-one device, meaning every student is getting a device. Those are also 5G enabled devices. So they have ubiquitous connectivity. Without having retention data, we have data that the number of complaints about campus Wi-Fi has decreased more than 80% because the students have cellular enabled coverage, just like our cell phones. Of course, we only will give these in areas where the network is good or in an area where we have already enhanced the network to be able to handle these devices. But those are really important pieces to this puzzle. I did some focus groups with students. I'm a qualitative researcher by training, right? So I did focus groups, and the common themes that the students had was that the Wi-Fi went out always at the most critical times.
Yeah, because everybody's using it.
During exam season, right before their final exam times, 11 o'clock at night when they're trying to do their heavy studying, because that's when everybody's gaming, everybody's studying. And that is their biggest challenge and complaint. They're afraid to take a test, or if they take a test and they get kicked off, they're sorry. Actually, I presented some of those data to faculty, and the faculty said to me, we always thought the students were using that as an excuse.
It's like the dog ate my homework. They're making up that the Wi-Fi went down.
Right. Exactly. I mean, when I think back to when I was faculty, if I would heard that, I'd probably be like, okay, Johnny, but it's valid. And so, these are the pieces that really do impact a student's ability to be successful.
Yeah.
And so when we think about, yes, potentially declining enrollments, right? Potentially declining retention, potentially the perception that the ROI of higher education isn't what it used to be. How can these institutions be innovative in this space? Remove as many barriers as possible, right? And so we have an institution, we built a 5G ANS network, which is advanced networking services, basically augmenting the Wi-Fi. Every student has a 5G enabled tablet. Wow. It costs $360 per student per year. That's the cost to the institution.
That's amazing. That's not,
I don't think that's a lot of money.
No, it's not.
So when we think about how much money per student an institution spends on different programs and different things, to be able to provide a student with a device that has connectivity, that doesn't seem like a stretch.
Well, it's interesting.
How much does it lose? This is what I always ask institutions. Yeah. How much does it cost to lose a student?
Well, it's interesting because when you have to make an investment like that, this $360 a student at that university, I can bet you if you go back, and I know universities pretty well, there's probably a $300, $400 fee that was slapped on the students at one point arbitrarily for something because we got to put a fee on that. We can't just give it for free. But if you told a student like, hey, look, even if you had to raise your fees and say, we do have to raise our fee by $360, I know, but you get this, you get something for the fee. There's a direct tie. Universities are really bad generally about showing direct ties from fee to something. And that makes a lot of sense to me. Now, I'm guessing if that's included in, is it included in tuition for those universities, or is it something that they pay?
The university's paying for it. How are they recovering the fees? Yeah. I don't know. I mean, that's up to them. I know that this university had a private donor who wanted to get this program up and going for the students. So, I mean, that's great. But
by the way, that's a great way to think about it too. Donations. Like if you're going to go out and try to look at some CapEx donations, you're running a capital campaign. I mean, putting a technology line in there are a lot of people out there that have dollars that are looking to help higher education, that when you donate your money for something, technology makes that difference that pays you back, makes the difference for people.
Well, I mean, those of us who have ever run or interacted with nonprofits, when you're able to say, this $360 is going to do X, Y, and Z, you're more likely to say, okay, I'm going to do that 360, or maybe I'll double it and I'll do 720 because I know I'm going to help out 2 students.
Yeah.
versus just blanket donations that you don't really know what and how that money is going to go to. So yes, quantifying that amount is really helpful when you think about what the impact could be. But I also encourage universities to look at their enrollment and see, what does it cost to lose a student? Because it costs a whole lot more than $360 a year to lose a student. That's probably what the university spent to market to that student.
Oh, at least. The cost of acquisition for a student is a lot of money.
Yep.
It's not. Well, I mean, I can have this conversation all day long, but we do want to bring you back for a little mini episode for our subscribers only. But before I let you go, I do want to give you an open mic, and not that I haven't already because you've said great things, but what else do you want to say about T-Mobile and your role in higher education? Anything at all that the audience should know?
Thanks, Joe. I really appreciate the opportunity. And I think the key takeaways is, one is T-Mobile is much more than a consumer phone company. We really are here to partner with institutions, with colleges and universities to think about student success, innovation in teaching and learning, academics and research, infrastructure improvements or enhancements on campus, campus safety. Those areas are something that I think resonates with every college leader. And it's something that we're willing to sit and have conversations with. And I do really appreciate the work T-Mobile's done to be a good partner in the higher ed space. And part of that is bringing me on so that I can translate, between the company and between the institutions on how we can really be build useful and meaningful partnerships. So yeah. Thank you for giving me the platform here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's funny because we do have to translate the work that we do in higher ed to companies that don't understand the nuance, right? Mm-hmm. There are a lot of nuances, structures, bureaucracies, reasons. You have to have a translator. What kind of company you are out there, ed tech, for-profit tech, you have to, if you're trying to sell to higher education or trying to help higher ed, you have to have a translator. You do. Or else there's a credibility factor that you don't get. It's so true. And I think you're a pretty credible guest there, Dr. Ann Clancy, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you,
I encourage everybody to follow you on LinkedIn, Ann. We can follow your work.
Absolutely.
All right, connect with Ann on LinkedIn. Ladies and gentlemen, there's your guest today. We're going to bring her right back. We're going to ask her about her transition from higher ed to ed tech. So if you want to know more about that, come back and join our subscriber network. Ladies and gentlemen, she's Dr. Ann Clancy. She's the head of higher ed strategy and higher ed advisor at T-Mobile. You've just ed upped. All right, everybody, we're back with Ann. And Ann, I have to tell you, I am kind of fascinated because I've done a similar transition to yours in that I've moved from higher education proper to ed tech. I guess you're like in tech with an ed subsidiary. I'm in an ed tech, but very similar. And I found it to be a fascinating journey, even the vernacular changes and, you know, the way people think and talk and the words that they use. And I'm going, what? How did you find that, you said a lot of people ask you about your transition. First of all, I want to know why you made it. Mm-hmm. Because we in higher ed, and you know this, we devote our lives and hearts and minds and sweat and tears and blood to students and institutions. And so there's usually a trigger. Maybe it's to do something bigger for more, which is more on the common side. But what was the trigger for you to move over and give us some of the secrets for a successful transition to a tech company from higher ed?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I mean, it's pretty complex. So to be fully transparent, when T-Mobile contacted me, I was just intrigued. I was like, why? First of all, a recruiter contacted me and didn't tell me the company. They just said, hey, would you be interested in talking with a Fortune 50 company? We'd want somebody with your credentials and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, sure. Again, I've said to you, Joe, that
hurts.
It's always good to show up, right? So I showed up. And so I had the conversation, and then they said, okay, you meet all the criteria. Would you be willing to continue a conversation with T-Mobile?
Nailed it.
And I said, T-Mobile? Wait, what? And so that's where it kind of took me aback. And I said, sure, because I was just genuinely curious at this point. Mm-hmm. But it took me 4 or 5 conversations for me to fully understand what and why and how I was going to be doing it. But this is where it was serendipitous, because at this point, now this was in the spring, early spring of 2021, I had already made the decision that I was going to get through the next academic year and start looking at a transition. I didn't know what that transition was going to be, but I was feeling really burnt out on transitioning a unionized college in and out of a pandemic. It's in a big city, in an urban environment. It was a lot. It was a lot of stress. And so I had already said, okay, I'm going to give this one more academic year and then move on. So this was a year before I had planned on already thinking about sort of what my transition would be. So it's almost like I put that out in the universe and it just kind of came along, maybe before I got fully burnt out. So what triggered me to make the move was one, it was an ability to build something. So T-Mobile was really just beginning this space in higher education. And so to come in at it from the ground up and say, we're going to build something and really build a strategy, build a process, teach the company how to do the work with institutions was exciting to me. The other piece was that the work that I was doing at the college regarding academic student success, impacting lives, was something that I would be able to potentially impact at scale in this space. So thinking about using technology for student success, how to use a company like T-Mobile to help close the digital divide, particularly in higher education. I have a heart for students, particularly students who are under-resourced, right? I mean, I didn't work at city colleges without that heart.
Right.
And so helping institutions realize and understand that students need their support and their help, and to remove those barriers for them to be successful is something that I still love doing. But I've also, in this space, have learned a lot about technology, and I've learned a lot about network and infrastructure, which is really the heart of soul of how all of our lives work these days. So all of that was just growth that was built into this new role. So I think, those were the key pieces that made the transition. And it wasn't easy, and it still isn't. There are some days that I still get really frustrated, because at the end of the day, we're a for-profit business. And I just think we have millions and millions and millions of dollars to spend on a Super Bowl commercial, but we can't give this university, this much money. I know they're different business units, and I know that there's different budgeting and, all sorts of things, but sometimes the do-gooder in me feels frustrated about the way the business does business. Yep. But at the end of the day, we still are doing so much good for these colleges and universities. And so I have to remind myself of that.
Also, there is some accountability on us, the colleges and universities, to do better too. Part of that is in decision making. You know this, Anne. I mean, there isn't a person you talk to these days that does not see that their institutional health is synonymous with technology health right now. Mm-hmm. You can't have one without the other. They're becoming embedded, wrapped around each other. It is the way of the future, and sometimes we're still pulling people along to remind them of that fact.
Efficiencies are important, and that is part of what digital transformation is about. And it's a vicious circle, right? Mm-hmm. And so being efficient and doing that in a digitally transformative way is hard. And it's hard sometimes when you have faculty who don't want to change, or don't want to change processes. They don't want to be innovative in the teaching and learning. And I absolutely, as a former faculty member, that's their right. But faculty members also need to understand who they're teaching and how to get to them, get to the students. And it isn't by not being innovative or creative or using technology.
What do you see for the future of higher education, Ann?
Higher Ed PodCon is coming. Go to higheredpodcon.com. That's higheredpodcon.com to learn more.
I see higher education continuing to be necessary and growing in the spaces of creating credentials of value. I think that micro-credentialing is a real thing. I think, we talk a lot about snackable content in marketing, right? So how we consume, meaning we, like you and me, just in our everyday lives, we consume marketing, we consume things in quick snippets. Yeah. I think that having consumable credentialing is really important for this generation of students, giving them nibbles of, I've learned this task means this, having this accomplished means I can do X, Y, and Z with it. I think that's something we've heard about the last few years, and I think that's really important. There's always going to be a market, I think, for liberal arts education in sort of that traditional space, but that's a very unique group of students. That's maybe a third of our students. There's a reason why the national average for college graduation in 4 years is 33%, right? It's because there's the rest of us, and I was one of them, who was not a traditional student, who needed those different spaces and those applied learnings and maybe working and going to school at the same time to be able to understand the value of all of these pieces I was learning. And that's something that I think more colleges need to adapt to. How does that happen? That happens through technology. That happens through hybrid, high flex, learn from anywhere models. It happens with using technology in both synchronous and asynchronous classroom settings. I think that that's the future. But this means that we have to be efficient in our processes, right? Maybe not having traditional semesters all year long, like having rolling starts.
You got it. Big time stuff. Well, the reason why we love having folks like you and on is because you see it from the double-sided marketplace that it is. Having access to the information that you have from a global technology company like T-Mobile gives us insight into the future for those higher education institutions that are sitting around in their city that don't have that access. So it's been a pleasure to have you here, and the insights have been many. Did you have fun, at least, here with me?
I did, Joe. You're great. And this has been a fun conversation. And listen, if any listeners want to further this conversation, I'd love to. Find her on LinkedIn. Ladies and gents, Dr. Ann Clancy, again, head of higher education strategy and higher ed advisor at T-Mobile. You've just ed upped.